I just want to make just a quick statement because I believe there's serious traffic problems around Oldham. I'm just going to give 5-minute leeway for elected members to arrive. Thank you. Okay, welcome to the Planning Committee meeting dated Wednesday, the 17th of July 2024. Just before we kick off, on a personal note, I'd like to thank Councillor Harkness for his participation as Vice Chair. I believe he's been the victim of a cull, but there we go. In his footsteps, we have Councillor Davis. Councillor Davies's specialist subject is parking. That's the questions, not the answers. Okay, so we'll move on. Do we have any apologies?
We received apologies from Councillors Akhtar, Lancaster and Woodbine.
Thank you. Do we have any urgent business?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay. Well, we move on to public question time.
We received no public questions.
Thank you. Minutes of previous meetings, have we had a chance to review? And you're all happy with that? Yeah? Okay, thank you. So we progress to item 6.
Thank you, Chair. So just to start on this item, before, or potentially to not get into this item, just want to raise a matter that's come up since we published the agenda on this item. So as you will know from the papers, it's recommended for refusal, and that is on the basis of at the time of writing the report, at the time of publishing the report, the applicant was not prepared to enter into a Section 106 agreement for the full amount of contributions required under Section 106. But since then, in communication with the applicant, he has confirmed that he is prepared to enter into a Section 106 agreement for the full amount. So for that reason, I'm recommending to you as a committee now that we actually defer this item to allow the heads of terms on a Section 106 agreement to be drawn up, and then we can bring the application back to committee in light of that new information. So that's my recommendation. If anyone is if the committee are in agreement of that, it can be proposed and seconded.
Councillor Charters.
Thanks. Peter, just with regards to the Section 106 agreement, I noticed the report also mentions that the applicant wasn't willing to go ahead with affordable housing. Is that something that's going to be addressed as part of this as well?
Yes.
Any other comments? No. Well, I suppose I'll propose the motion that we defer. Do I get a seconder?
No, second that, thank you.
Okay, so unfortunately that's part of the process in terms of it can only be deferred by committee, and obviously the committee may yet choose not to defer it. So it's obviously we'll see what the committee decide now in terms of deferring it or not. If it is deferred, it'll come back to a future committee, and you'll have the chance to speak at that committee.
Okay, so we clarified that. Can I get did I get a seconder? I did. And all in favour? Item deferred. Thank you. We now move on to item number 7. Yeah, if the,
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. So this application is for the erection of 21 dwellings on a piece of land in Shaw. The application is coming to Planning Committee because it's a major residential development. Sorry. So on the screen there is the location of the site. The site is just off Lilac View Close in Shaw, and it's divided into 2 parcels by Knoll Road, which is that road there. So you have the big parcel and the small parcel. So that's an aerial view of the application site, just below the red dot, and that's the smaller parcel on the other side of the road. So as you see in terms of context, to the north of the site is mature residential development, while to the south of the site is the green belt. So that's the proposed layout of the development. On the big parcel, it's proposed to erect 17 dwellings in all, ranging from 2 to 4 bed in size, and it's a mix of detached and semi-detached. While on the small parcel, you've got 4 properties, all semi-detached. So in terms of the appearance of the properties, we've got 7 house types in all. So, and the following slides illustrate the various house types. So that's the first one there, the Abbeystead, and then Legram, Marshall, Springhead, Tanbrook, Wyresdale, and then Wyresdale 2. So the difference between this and the previous one is just that this is slightly bigger than Wyresdale 1. So in terms of the material planning considerations, starting with the principle of the development, the site is allocated for residential development in the Oldham local plan, and therefore a residential housing development is considered acceptable in principle. And then next is the impact of the development on the character of the area. So in terms of scale, the development will be similar to existing properties in the area. And then in terms of external appearance as well, it will be similar. The houses on the larger plot, or the larger parcel, will be finished in red brick, similar to the ones on Lilac View Close, while the 4 dwellings on the smaller parcel will be finished in buff brick, to match the stone development on Knoll Road. So, and then in terms of impact on amenity, because the development will be well set back from neighboring properties, it's considered there will be no significant overbearing or overshadowing effect, and the design would eliminate any significant overlooking of neighboring properties. So as a result, it's considered that the impact on amenity will be minimal. Then in relation to highway issues, the larger parcel will be accessed off Lilac View Close, while the smaller parcel will be accessed off Knoll Road. So visibility at the access points is considered acceptable, and there will be dedicated parking spaces for each plot within the site, to eliminate any off-site parking. So in terms of highway issues, it's considered in principle that the scheme will be acceptable. Then in relation to trees and biodiversity net gain, some trees will be removed on site, but there is also a proposed landscaping plan which would provide an adequate number of replacement trees to minimize or to mitigate the loss of trees. And in terms of biodiversity net gain, the applicant did indicate that they would be willing to address that by way of financial contribution. So it's considered that from trees and BNG point of view, the scheme will be acceptable. And then next is affordable housing and public open space. Policy 23 of the Oldham plan requires that a major residential development should make some provision towards public open space. With regards to affordable housing, the applicant has indicated that they would be making some contribution towards that. So, but in terms of public open space, they have later in the day come to say that they don't think the scheme will be viable if they have to make some contribution towards public open space. But there hasn't been any documentary evidence, to support that claim. So because it's a policy requirement that if an applicant for a major development is not willing to make contributions towards public open space, then a viability assessment should be undertaken to back up that claim. But in this case, no viability assessment has been submitted to officers to consider. So from that point of view, it's considered that the proposal would not comply with the relevant requirements of Policy 23. So based on the failure to comply with the public open space requirements, officers are recommending the application for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now we have the objector.
Questions?
Any questions?
Thanks, Joe. So in the report, it mentions sort of highways comments, to a waiting or something along those lines. So I know we're showing an agenda, but something along those lines. Yeah, final comments being awaited. Now you made some reference saying that the visibility was okay. So is that basically the response to the report, or is there any more detail to the highways? Because looking at you know, I know the area a bit well, and it does look like it's, you know, it's not got the best access though. And then the other point was that I think some previous applications there in the past, I know it was a while ago, it made reference to being rejected on grounds that it was adjoining the green belt. So would that not still be appropriate to consider as well?
Yeah, so I'll take the last issue for that Wendy will comment on the highway issue. In relation to the application that was refused, I think that was about 20 years ago. But since then, the piece of land in question has now been allocated for housing development. And therefore, I mean, the only scheme or development that would be acceptable in principle on the piece of land would be residential development. So events have actually overtaken that previous consideration. Thank you.
Any more questions from the floor?
Wendy's going to answer the last question.
Oh, sorry, Wendy.
In relation to the highway layout, do you want to show the site layout, please? I've been off for a couple of weeks, and just as I went off, I requested some additional information which hasn't been provided, so I'm still not 100% happy with the layout. But because it was being recommended for refusal, it wasn't critical. And as you enter the site, it's quite narrow, and then the annotation is that it widens out. But I want to know the width of the narrow part and what it actually widens out to, and that hasn't been provided.
Thank you, Wendy. Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions there. So I'll ask the first one and then I'll ask the other question rather than someone come in. So the question's to Wendy there, which is a question on the back of what she just commented on there. So she needs more information to give an accurate judgment or working out the situation on that one, I presume. So she can answer that if she wants later when I've finished. The other question is if you can ask about the development. Everything seemed to be in line here. Everything seemed, apart from potentially this access issue, but everything seems to be in order, and yet it's down for refusal. Is that just because of the Section 106 element of it? You know, I mean, would it be worth more negotiation or something like that?
Okay, with the highway layout, it might be, I want to be absolutely sure that what is actually built works, and I haven't got that assurance yet from this drawing because there aren't any dimensions on it. So it's possible that a carriageway width could be provided, that's acceptable, but that drawing isn't showing me that, and that's the drawing that's been approved. So that's my answer.
Sorry, Wendy, when you say approved,
Yeah.
Approved by the developer or approved to be accepted by planning?
So by committee. So if we were approving this application this evening, normally the highway layout is what will be built. Right. This isn't. We haven't got to that stage with this yet because I'm not 100% certain of the dimensions of the carriageway.
And is that due to the developer?
I've requested the information and it hasn't been provided by the developer thus far.
So therefore, the developer has not met their obligations in terms of our criteria?
So, obviously we have to, as the committee are aware, we have to weigh all the different factors into consideration, and whether in this situation the highway's layout is so poor, shall we say, that it would be a reason for refusal. In the context of other things happening with this application, we felt it was prudent just to focus on the one reason for refusal. Obviously, if the committee want to consider a further reason, feel that is something they can do. But no, the focus was on the actual public open space provision, which, if if you're happy for me to, Chair, I'll answer Councillor Davis's second question on that.
Yes, if you will.
So in terms of the reason for refusal, yes, to answer your question, Councillor Davis, it is purely around the fact that a Section 106 agreement has not been reached on the public open space. Obviously, we do try to negotiate with applicants and reach an agreement on those situations. This application, as you'll see from the information about it, has been in with us for 15 months. We've had multiple, obviously, back and forth with the applicant, trying to deal with different issues, and it got to a point where we felt there's no further progress was being made on this, and so that's why I've brought it for recommending for refusal on this particular reason about 106.
So, thank you, Peter. So, in your professional judgment, you would say we have given, as a council, the developer every opportunity to meet his obligations. However, clearly he's failed.
So, the situation in terms of the Section 106 is obviously the requirement was outlined early on in the process, and only very late on did the applicant raise concern about that financial requirement, and without further evidence to suggest why it would not be viable to make that contribution, we're left with no choice but to say, actually, there's no evidence to support that, so either there is a Section 106 agreement and we can accept the development, or there isn't, and therefore we recommend refusal.
Okay, sorry to pressure on this, Peter. Just one final one from me, just for the, and I am one of them, the novices in the room. Section 106 is a contribution from the developer towards affordable housing, etc., and it's really, from their perspective, based on profit, what they think they can make and contribute, and the formula for the 106 contribution is a standard formula that's used across all applications, so it's not specific to each one. And yet, in this case, the developer disagrees with the amount to contribute towards the community, in effect, over this development.
So a Section 106 agreement can involve multiple different types of infrastructure and what have you. In this case, what was required is a public open space contribution. So as you say, there is a set formula for how we calculate that, and it's the same for every development. What national policy allows for is where a development is not viable to be able to afford Section 106 contributions, that can be a reason to waive all or some of that requirement, but it has to be backed up by an independently appraised viability appraisal. In this case, that isn't there.
Okay. Thanks for that. Do we have any more comments from Councillor Quick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to Mr. Richards. When you came to the figure of £139,931.52, to be precise, was the developer aware of that calculation at the beginning, middle, or end of where we are at now?
I'll turn to the case officer, but so I'm aware, yes, they were aware.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The applicant, well, the agent's aware, because as soon as we got the comments from the policy officers, we forwarded the comments on to the agents, so they're very much aware, and that was almost immediately we received the comments from policy officers.
Any further questions? No, thank you. So I'd like to bring to the table the objector, Lisa Smirk. Mm-hmm. So we do have a time limit, Lisa, on the timing, but we're a bit flexible on it, in all honesty. So just when you're ready. Thank you.
The residents in opposition to the proposed application on Greenfield. This plan is not a new plan, and the previous application failed to demonstrate that it accords with the aims and objectives of PPG 3. and was refused. This plan still fails to accord with PPG3 and the clear guidance for protecting greenfield and greenbelt land from development and therefore should be refused. To applicants, the applicant's highway report states a reduction of agricultural vehicle movement would benefit the residents. Clough has never been impacted from agricultural vehicle movement from this site in over 35 years. Therefore, this claim is unfounded. This highway report does not review the suitability of the link roads to access the planned site. These link roads are often used for resident parking and in areas only 5.0292 metres wide, well below the minimum recommendations of residential roads. Approving this plan will add over 48.3 extra vehicles, which raises highway safety and access concerns, and should be given greater consideration when deciding this application. Mark Lane Access Road is off a sharp corner on Beale Lane with reduced visibility to oncoming traffic. It is in areas only 5.0298 metres wide and does not afford enough space for two vehicles to pass at once. It has signage indicating it's not suitable for HGVs and trucks and has a narrow footpath to one side and a 6-foot dry stone wall to the opposite side. Both access roads, Mark Lane and Mount View, are built on a steep incline that floods in inclement weather. In winter, due to snow and ice, Mark Lane and Mount View are often impassable and unsafe for drivers, and a safety concern also for pedestrians.
30 seconds.
Knoll Road exits onto the start of the steep incline onto Mark Lane. At this point, the road width is also 5.0298 metre, which does not give adequate turning space into the road and means the car has to cross to the path of oncoming traffic. Therefore, there must be only one option available, and this is to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Take a breath. That was eloquent report.
Thank you.
Sorry, Lisa.
Do you want me to sit down?
I want you to sit down. Yeah, you're not done yet, I'm afraid. Do we have any questions for the objector?
Okay.
So I've got one for you, Lisa. Obviously, I'm aware that you're a resident close to the situation. I just want to focus on the elephant in the room here, which is the parking. Obviously, it's an extremely narrow lane, and obviously there's safety concerns. I mean, could you just elaborate on that, please?
Yes. Safety concerns are obviously, first and foremost, the roads are narrower than the recommended residential roads, and when residents are parking on that road, that also means it becomes much more narrower. We have families with young children in that area who use the area to ride bikes and play out, which we all want for children. But the area is also made up predominantly of bungalows, where we have elderly and retired residents. These residents are often only able to move around using mobility aids, etc. And this can often mean that they're pushed into the road to pass things, or the pavement that is available, especially at the bottom of Mark Lane, is quite narrow with a lamppost on it, and it does push them into the road. Therefore, I am extremely concerned about the safety issues of this development.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have any members' questions for Lisa?
Maybe not for Lisa, but I think she touched on there about the potential about Greenbelt. This isn't Greenbelt land, is it? I mean, maybe Peter could comment on that anyway. I mean, you can if you want.
I'm happy to comment on that. No, the land is not Greenbelt, it is Greenfield. but it abuts onto Greenbelt and is surrounded by Greenbelt. And I think if you look at PPG3, it does actually say that we should be protecting Greenfield and Greenbelt. Also, recently, in the full council meeting, I believe it was passed that we will be looking at the PFE more closely to reduce the amount of the Greenbelt and Greenfield land being used for building and residential use, and highlighting more on brownfield sites. That was supported by all councillors. Therefore, I feel if you've supported this motion, you should be supporting a refusal to build on Greenbelt land that abuts Greenfield sites. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members' questions? Councillor Harkness. Charters.
I'll take it as the compliment. I assume it was
It is a compliment, trust me.
This is probably more of a question for Peter, but it's something that the objector mentioned around PPG3. As I understand it, that is old law. It's been superseded by the NPPF, and whilst I understand what you said about the Place for Everyone scheme, until any action has been taken, we have to consider that as sort of gospel in terms of how we decide plan applications. So I was just wondering, Peter, if you can just give us a bit of an explanation on what the current regulation is around that point.
So just to clarify on that, so yeah, as Councillor Charters has said, unfortunately PPG3 has been replaced, so it's now the National Planning Policy Framework we have to refer to, and the policies are somewhat different in that respect. But also, as Abiola referred to earlier, this site is allocated for in principle for residential development, and that is through our existing local plan, the core strategy and development management policies, DPD. It's not through Places for Everyone. Places for Everyone is like adding on to that. So in this case, from the point of view of principle, notwithstanding details as we've talked about like highways and other matters, in principle residential development is acceptable on this site, no matter the fact that it abuts the Greenbelt.
So I think just want to clarify this. So I think the elephant in the room here is essentially how the developer has not complied with procedural obligations through no fault from the council who've shown, I think, what's the word I'm looking for, Peter? Is that allowed? Well, we've been extremely willing to engage. I think from what I've seen, we've been nothing but try to accommodate the developer, and the sticking point at every occurrence seems to be the developer. My concern is, there are other hidden concerns behind this, which obviously access, etc., etc. So I just wanted to say that in terms of the reason for us to object as recommended is simply on the developer's failings, not ours, in our view.
Well, I think I just, obviously, in terms of when we can plan this, it's not about who the applicant is or anything like that. So just to clarify from my point of view, it's around, it's the failure to agree an appropriate Section 106 agreement in line with our policies without any viability evidence to support that. So that's the reason for refusal.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I think I think you're okay now. I think you can stay if you want. But I think that.
Someone else to speak as well.
Yeah, thanks. That's what the question I was going to say, Chair. The developer.
Do you want to say this till after the speakers?
Speaking on this, aren't they?
Yeah.
So we can ask the developer these questions, and they can answer them. So they might have good answers, maybe not.
Is it the applicant? I'd like to call on behalf of the applicant, Gareth Glennon. Welcome, Gareth. Not the easiest hand you've ever been dealt, is it? I would have thought.
No, I've had plenty of nights in here, Chair, as a former officer, and this is probably the hardest one. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. There's been a number of points raised tonight, and I think the key sort of sticking points which have come out, obviously, in terms of the Section 106, which I'll come on to a little bit later. One of the things which was mentioned was highways, and I think in terms of where we are with that at the moment, that information can be provided, and it can be provided relatively quickly. As one of your officers has pointed out, this is an application which has been in for 15 months. It is a long time. We've worked very hard with your officers to sort of try and get to a point where we've got an acceptable scheme. We are nearly there. That time frame, we would prefer it to be a lot sooner, but there's been a number of things happened sort of outside of the planning process which have impacted upon that. In terms of the Section 106 contribution, the applicant is more than willing to provide the evidence which the council requires to sort of look at that Section 106 contribution. We would ask committee to defer the application to allow us and to give us that time to provide that information to liaise with your officers. I think that's all I can say really, other than, you know, this is an allocated housing site. We want to see it come forward. Your officers want to see it come forward. We are 95% there, and we'd like to sort of get over the line.
But you do accept the applicant has not met the requirements in the given time frame?
If you're looking at this from a purely time frame perspective, the local authority would have 13 weeks to deal with the application from the date it was submitted. Clearly, that was never going to happen because there's been a number of discussions in terms of layout, in terms of comments that have come back from consultees. So, no, I wouldn't accept that we haven't dealt with it within a time frame. We have been working with your officers. It is just unfortunate that a decision was made where this application has to come to committee now.
Sorry, and just my last point before I pass on, it's my gig. Is it simply a question and then that the developer disputes the level of contribution to the community in terms of this development?
I think that's very poorly worded, if I could say that, Chair. What you're indicating is that the developer is trying to sort of negate the community from some kind of contribution. That's not how the Section 106 system works, and I hope your officers will clarify that. What we were turning around and saying...
Well, I'm happy for you to, if I'm honest.
Well, I think it's better coming from your officers because they're the impartial ones. I think where we are at the moment, we are at a point where we've got Section 106 contributions relating to affordable housing, biodiversity net gain, and public open space, and all those three combined would make the scheme unviable as it stands. So what we're hoping for and what we're asking for is a little bit more time to demonstrate that those contributions in the current form don't enable this scheme to come forward. What that figure may be, I'm not sure because I'm not a viability consultant, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Charters?
Thanks, Chair. It's just a quick one. It's sort of just follow on from what Councillor Hints has asked, which is, I know you said that obviously you can get this information to us very quickly and it's been a process of, you know, a number of months. What was the sort of, trying to work out the best way of saying this, what was the hold up in terms of getting the viability assessment overall? What was the, why wouldn't we have had it? Is more my question.
Thank you. In terms of where we are, obviously the contributions, the application process has gone on. The sort of final contribution in terms of a confirmed sum from officers came later on in the process. Estimates were given prior to that. So obviously we're producing viability information. We need firm information before we can sort of go down that route. When the sum was provided and we sort of came back to officers and said we need that little bit more time, officers determined that because the application had been in for so long, they wanted it to come to committee, and if we wanted, you know, we could address committee and ask for the deferral. So that's where we are tonight, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Hartness.
Yeah, I think Josh has touched on that one. So, I mean, you did make a comment saying that the council should have dealt with it quicker anyway.
No, that wasn't the case, Councillor.
Well, you said, you know, they should have dealt with it in like 12 weeks, whatever, and you said it's been in for 15 months.
That's the statutory time period for it. It was just a response to a question.
Yeah, no, I know, but obviously, you know, that would have put you in an even more difficult position. So, you would, as you said, you've already would have had some idea of estimates and you've done some viability, right? You're saying the council didn't provide you with the exact figure, but they gave you estimates. Well, sure, you should have had some indication of what you thought would have been viable, which could have been submitted? And secondly, on the highways scheme, you said you could provide the numbers and the things relating to that quite quickly. Well, again, the application's been in for 15 months, so why has that not been done so far?
Just going back to the highways, because that's the easiest one. The highways consultant that was dealing with this application unfortunately passed away at the beginning of the year. So there was a transition period in terms of getting that up to date. And until this evening, I wasn't aware that that information was required. So all I can do is apologise to the committee in that regard. In terms of, the Section 106 information, yes, estimates were provided. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we are where we are. We've now got the final information, and all we're asking for is this committee gives us a little bit more time to provide the information that officers require, to bring forward an allocated housing site. We are nearly there, as I keep saying.
Councillor Quigg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you experienced any delays with the council on this? Because it seems to be we've got sort of delays between information being passed from one to the other. So have you experienced any delays? Can you give us any evidence of that?
I would not criticise officers for dealing with applications. In terms of how long it's taken to deal with an application, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's been delays that have been, officers' fault. That is not something that I'm prepared to do. The application process has taken a while because of statutory consultees in terms of how long that information comes. Your officers dealing with it have been on the ball in terms of coming back to us, and they've dealt with it as professionally as possible. So I'm not going to sit here and blame the council.
So the delays have come from mainly your side, i.e. being someone passed away, measurements
there have been a number of reasons for the delays, but I'm not going to sort of turn around and criticise officers and say this is where we are. I will hold our hands up and say yes, we could have dealt with things in a quicker manner, but there have been a variety of reasons. I've alluded to one or two of them, but I'm not going to sit here and sort of blame the council for, failure to do things within a certain time frame. We have worked to a point. We have got to a point now where we are nearly there. In my opinion, this application shouldn't have come to committee in its current form. We should have been allowed the time to deal with it, but we're here tonight, and I'm hoping committee will allow us to provide the additional information required.
And in terms of consultation with residents, have you had any?
We haven't specifically. No, it's just been through the planning process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Quigg. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, mate.
Sorry, there we go.
Thank you, Chair. This has gone on for, 18 months, 15 months, whatever it was.
I think it was 15 months, yeah.
Whatever it was. That's time. If this is refused, for example, maybe it'll come back again. It's going to take up more council time, planning time. They're very busy. Now, are you confident if this was deferred that you think that the council and yourself could come to the arrangements and be able to sort out all these issues?
We've had tentative discussions with a viability consultant who does a number of reports and submits them to the council. The information we've got is that report can be provided to us within 2 to 3 weeks. So that could be with your officers, say 3 weeks, a 3-week period.
So if I can come back on that then, Peter, do you think that would be a possibility that, would that work, rather than it have to come back again?
Sorry, I'm not following your question, sorry.
I'll re-ask the question. Do you think that would work if it was deferred and you'd have more time to talk rather than waste planning department time and all the rest of it? Do you think it would work if it was deferred to be able to sort out exactly where we can get this over the line or not over the line?
That is an option, absolutely. And so it's for the committee to consider whether that would be reasonable or not in this situation. Just in terms of the timescales, just to clarify in terms of the process we go through the viability, if, as Mr Glennon refers to, that there's a viability appraisal with us within 3 weeks, we then have to do an independent viability appraisal to check the figures. So that will take at least another 3 weeks. So we're probably talking, again, assuming that can all be worked through and we come to an agreement about it, assuming any outstanding highways issues can be resolved too, we probably wouldn't be bringing this back to committees for at least 2 months.
Thank you, Peter.
If I can come back.
Yeah, certainly.
So just to the applicant there, I mean, would that be acceptable to you? Do you think that would help work and then it'd come to committee and then they can make the decision then?
Yeah, we're more than willing to work with officers. You know, we've sort of done that over the time period. We want to continue to work with it. The last thing we want is to end up in a position where we've got a refusal and, you know, we're sort of looking at a completely new scheme with all the costs and everything else associated with it. We want to work with the council.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. I just wanted to just point out, really, you know, it's all right. Obviously, you're taking the perspective from the developer, which is obviously key, and obviously we've got to take the other factors in terms of from residents and obviously from our planning office. So obviously it's a multi-decision making approaches. So my question for Peter is, you made a recommendation in your team to reject on ground solid basis, taking all the evidence into consideration.
So at the time of writing the report, yes, obviously at that point there was no commitment necessarily to do a viability appraisal. That was an outstanding issue. Mr. Glennon, on behalf of the applicant, has tonight committed to do a viability appraisal. So from that point of view, it is I would have to defer it to the defer is the wrong word. I would have to refer it to the committee for them to consider whether that is reasonable to make a deferral on that basis. Alan, is there anything you want to add from a legal point of view on that?
No, Chair, it's up to yourselves whether you accept the officer's original recommendation or go along with the applicant's request for a deferral. What I would say, Chair, if you do defer it, is that you put a deadline for the responses.
Okay.
Mr. Evans has just picked up on what I was going to say. You know, what the committee could do is make a recommendation or resolution that if the information isn't provided within a certain time period, then officers are delegated to refuse the application, unless, you know, there's mitigating circumstances. As I've said, we want to work with you and we will try and get this information to you ASAP.
Thank you, Councillor Quigg.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've had quite long enough on waiting for things in this application. And to be quite frank, it should either have been provided when we got to this stage, or it shouldn't have been, and it should have been deferred before we even got to this stage. And quite frankly, we're here now tonight to vote on this. As far as I'm concerned, there should be no deferral. Let's just crack on with what we need to do.
Thank you for your time. I think we need to, before we go to the vote, is give the ward councillor, Mr. Howard Sykes, Councillor Howard Sykes, a platform to speak. I don't need to explain the rules to you, do I, Councillor Sykes? I'm sure you're well adverse.
I don't know. Sometimes these days the rules seem to change.
They do, don't they?
But there we are. No, you don't, Chair. And I'll try and be as brief and as succinct as I can. And this isn't something I do often. So there's two or three things I'd just like to bring to committee's attention. The first is, as Mr. Richards will know, because I'm never out of his inbox, there was at least one committee this was due to come to, if not two, which have been delayed to wait for information, which still hasn't been forthcoming. So I welcome the recommendation to determine this tonight, and I welcome it's to be refused, because I think that's only right. And I think getting quality developments and the right decisions is just what our planning department should be doing. And so I commend them on that. A couple of things that I was surprised at. I was pleased to hear earlier on that we still have some concerns on the highways because we haven't got the specifications. I really would ask committee to consider the access, which is Mark Lane with the very narrow pinch point and Mount View Road. I think there's very good highway reasons that have not been satisfied by the transport statement that refers to agricultural movements, which was news to me. That issue needs addressing. The second issue, and I know it talks about conditions regardless of what you decide to do, because this application in one form or another will come back. The the report talks about one previous application, and I'm pretty certain, and I was pleased to see the case officer say there's actually two, one from 20 years ago and one from about 2020, if I remember. So two previous applications have been refused on this site, so there's some good planning history there, and it's important, you know, I'll accept, because it's sown, at some point this site is going to be developed, but it needs to be the right sort of development for the site. Just so you know, it is next to Greenbelt. It's next to the source of the River Beal, and I'm particularly concerned about some of the drainage issues, which is what I think some of the residents are really concerned about as well. It talks about planning conditions in here. I've been caught out before where planning conditions, shall we say, have been promised but haven't been robust enough to deliver solutions for local residents. So I just seek an assurance on that, regardless of what you decide to do on this or other one. The other couple of things I'd point out to you is the affordable housing is on the smaller, all on the smaller site, on the other side of the road, segregated from the site. If you were looking for a quality mixed development, is that how you do it? You put the people who live in the cheap houses on this side of the road, and you put everybody else on the other side of the road. Or if I was a cynic, I'd say them houses on that side of the road are going to get built and sold, and you know what, them four on that side might not do. But you can't speculate about that. But it seems really strange to me that the four affordable houses are at the end of an unadopted, badly made up road, whereas all the top dollar ones and the affordable ones are at £250,000 are all on the other side. So I think there's a better quality development that could be put through. And then I think the other bit, and I don't want to be picky, but it's not Knoll Road. The road is called the Road Knoll. It's wrong on the application, it's wrong on the map, and it was wrong when you referred to it. The street is called the Road Knoll. And I think, if you want that, sums up, shall we say, the attitude of the person or persons that have been involved in this application about attention to detail and deadlines or not attention to detail. So in summary, Chair, I think the amount of time planning and spending on this has been good. I think you should determine it tonight, but I also think you should consider refusing it for highway issues, both on the plan and the link road for the new bits, as well as on the old bits of the road, as well as not agreeing the 106 agreement. And look at the drainage conditions, because that will be crucial to this site. They're not causing problems. And I'll call it a draw at that, Chair. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. Do we have any questions for Councillor Sykes? Councillor Quigg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sykes, I'm obviously a long-standing member in Shaw. What kind of public reception did this receive when it obviously first come out? Was there, obviously, as we've heard, there's been no consultation with local residents, so presumably you've been at the brunt end, obviously, as well, Mr. Chairman, yourself. So, overall, out of 10, what would you probably give this site, this application?
Local people, and it's about around 100 properties that access will be impacted on this. Have been quietly outraged, I think, or very concerned. They're not against development. They're not, you know, people have seen me argue, and you'll have read reports here where I support housing, because we do need some new houses. But it's about the quality of this and is it suitable. So clearly not with the local residents. Been no attempt to engage, have a discussion at all, as far as I'm aware, and I'll stand to be corrected. And residents are still concerned, and I certainly know there's at least 2 residents who would have wanted to be here tonight because they thought it was going to an earlier planning committee, which rightly so Mr. Richards didn't take it to, because he wanted to give the developer a bit more time to get the information, and then we brought it here with a recommendation, and I can't believe the developer hasn't read that. So that information could have been supplied before tonight if you wanted to do that, but now you're going to take the word that it is after it's been dragged on. And local residents have been dragged on who want some certainty about this for at least 15 months. So it's a very low score out of 10.
When you say low, councillor, could you be more specific?
Two and a half.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Harkness?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There was an application in the report said there was one from about 20 years ago, but you mentioned there was one in 2020, which was also refused. Was that on similar grounds around highways access as well?
According to my memory, I'm pretty certain it was, but although the report and the information we've got here says not, it was around similar issues, whereas I'm pretty certain it was refused on highway issues, which was a pleasant surprise in one point of view, but it was nice to have residents' concerns which are exactly the same, and if anything they're worse now because the traffic, car usage, more adults staying at home longer on a very narrow road is even worse. So like I said, there's planning precedents on this site with the two previous applications.
Peter?
Yeah, if I could just come in on that just to clarify, because I don't want you to question Councillor Zagger's memory, because you've been here longer than me and I wasn't here in 2020, but in terms of our records, there was no application in 2020, so maybe, again, thinking of a different site, I'm not sure, but what's in the report is, as far as we're aware, is the situations in the planning history of this site.
Sorry, if it helped to clarify, I think the earlier application that isn't mentioned was actually submitted and then withdrawn, so therefore it doesn't exist. But to the public, there's been two applications, hasn't there? If that's helpful of clarity, so we're not going to fall out on our record.
Okay, any? Of course. Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. You said at the beginning when you first started to speak there, Howard, you want everything to be looked at and you want to give it the full opportunity for everybody to sort out what they need to sort out. Now, if we refuse this, and I mean, obviously you know where I'm going with it, is probably deferment, because I think, you know, we don't need to waste loads of planning time for something that may or may not come back again and use up more time. Do you think that it would be a good idea to defer it and give it that extra time of what you suggested there at the beginning?
That's an interesting interpretation of what I said. I think it needs determining. I think they've had more than enough time. I think residents want this determined. If then subsequently somebody wishes to submit another application and we go through the process again, that's their right and their want. Hopefully they'll have listened to the recommendations in the report, the debate tonight, and that application, which I think would be a better one, will be a better development, and then you'll have to consider that on its merits at its time. So I wouldn't give them any longer, because we've given them 15 plus months and we still haven't got all the information we need, and that's why I was surprised to see the officer's recommendation for that reason. But I welcome it, and I think it wasn't made lightly, because I think this person has not been a model developer, shall we say. I'll leave it at that in terms of planning department, and that's nothing to do with why we should judge the application, but we've spent 15 months of officer time on this, and now we should determine it on the information we've got in front of us. And if another application comes in, well, so be it, and we'll judge that on its time. And that would be my clear suggestion to you and the clear wish of residents.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. Anything? One last one?
Yeah,
Councillor
sorry,
Quigg?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. Is it a case, if we were to defer it as Councillor's been suggested, that this would be two bites at a rotten apple, or should we just basically just crack on with it?
Councillor Quigg does have a way with words, doesn't he? I think you should refuse it on the reasons the officer has said, and I'd also ask you to give some serious consideration for refusing it for the lack of highways information on the plan and on the area I suggest. So I think there's two very good reasons for refusing this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. Councillor Hoban.
Thanks. I presume it's coming to the floor now. Councillor Sykes has gone.
Yes, absolutely.
So I just want, in my opinion, I think, am I right in saying that we've done it on the public open space issue? There was a couple of other issues that we could have rejected it for anyway. And I think, to be fair to Peter, and we've heard him say defer quite a few times, I would prefer this to be rejected right out with the recommendations for the officers, because I think there's too many aspects of this, really, for a deferral. They need to go back to the drawing board, right to scratch for me, and I move it for rejection.
Are you raising a proposal to motion then, or?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to.
Do we get a seconder?
Ask if you would consider putting the highways issue as well on the as another reason rather than just the 106. And then if that's so, then I'm happy to second.
I think there's more than two issues, really, Garth. For any of the issues, I'm happy to move it for rejection.
So we've got a mover, a seconder. All in favour? So,
If we hadn't highways to speak, we hadn't highways one, then Wendy needs to speak.
sorry, Wendy, you need to speak on the highways issue.
I'll just run through how I assess the application, because a few highway issues have been raised this evening. So I have to look at the effect of the development on the local highway network, and the effect that these additional houses will have is not significant. But what I'm not happy with is the actual layout. So I'm not happy with the new layout and the information that has been provided so far. So if I was providing my consultee response to the case officer, I'd be saying the applicants failed to demonstrate, and they'll correct me if they weren't happy with this, they'd tell me, but I'd be saying something like the applicants failed to demonstrate that access into the new development is acceptable.
Yes, Peter?
Just to add to what Wendy's saying again, to extend the process in terms of, obviously Wendy comes at things purely from a highways point of view. That's her job, and that's quite right. Obviously, as planning officers, and in terms of Aviola making a recommendation, and you as a committee making a decision, you have to consider whether what Wendy has raised in terms of that specific issue around the narrowness of that access is such a highway safety concern that it justifies a reason for refusal. Because the MPPF does make that clear, it's got to be a very significant highway safety concern in that sense. So I think as you're considering this motion, you're considering adding a reason refusal. We just want to set that out very clearly for you. That's what you've got to consider.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Now, people have said reasons. I think there was just one reason why it's been recommended for rejection, which was the not being able to agree 106 contributions. Now,
I think one reason is good enough.
I'd appreciate no comments while I'm speaking, everybody, please. So, I think that this application, I don't see any reason why we don't give it the time required. An extra couple of months, as he said. If they've not given the information, it gets rejected. It doesn't come back to committee. It's gone. And if it comes to committee and it doesn't meet the requirements that are required, I'll be the first to recommend that we don't accept it. We refuse it. If it's highways grounds, they've not had a chance to look at the highways situation properly. Wendy's not had the time to assess the correct information. Now, why don't we just give it the time to do that? So my recommendation is that we refuse the reason that what Brian's proposed, and we do a motion. We do a recommendation of it's given more time. Give it a deferment. Give it more time. So it saves the planning department time, and we can either get this over the line or we can't get it over the line.
Okay, as chair, I think on balance we've heard a reasonable point of views. So I'd like to just bear with me when I'm speaking. Do we have so we've got a proposer? Have we got a seconder? All in favour?
Can I?
Oh, sorry.
We need to clarify there. So
what we're voting for?
What we're voting for. So
okay.
If I'm understanding, if I put what I'm hearing and you confirm or not, you're proposing that we recommend based on the reason for refusal in the report and a highway reason for refusal based upon Wendy's comments about the highways access.
Can I just clarify for me, for my motion for refusal, I'm quite happy to go with the one reason and to reject this full stop, because if it ever does come back, then it will have to go to Wendy again, and all that will have to be done in a new proposal, won't it? So we might as well just reject it on the grounds that the officers have put forward, and then any subsequent planning application that comes forward, the developer will have to make sure he gets it right.
So are we, sorry, Peter, are we clear on the reasons for the motion?
So if that's what
for
Councillor
rejection?
Hobing is proposing, so that one reason, can I confirm that Councillor Hartness as seconder, you're happy with that?
I'd like to point a clarification first though, because obviously we've got the 106. So if then he, in a couple of weeks' time, comes back and says, oh, actually, here's my viability study, which says that it's not viable, then that doesn't mean to say, then we say, oh, well, actually, then, right, so it's now can be approved. It would have to go through a full reassessment, a full planning process again from scratch. Is that correct?
So if the committee tonight decides to refuse the application, then it is refused. In terms of what then might potentially happen in terms of next steps, the applicant would have a couple of choices. One, they could appeal the decision to refuse, and in that situation, the appeal is not only determined upon what we have considered, but if the applicant provides further information such as a viability assessment at the appeal, the inspector is obliged to consider that. So obviously that might factor into any inspector's decision. Secondly, they may simply choose not to appeal and to resubmit an application with all the details that we've been asking for.
On that basis, and like they could go to appeal, and that's saying I would still go with the. I would prefer it if we had the highways concern on there as well.
Councillor Hobin. Right. Okay. So let procedure formulate in my mind. So we've got a motion from Councillor Hobin. Is that seconded? Right. Are we removing Councillor Hobin's motion from the table? No.
I don't know whether Councillor.
If it's something that gets this done tonight and gets it rejected, I'm happy to add that if it's okay with the officers.
So Peter, are you au fait with the content of the motion?
So again, just in terms of what I said before, it seems like now Councillor Hobing is proposing a motion to refuse on the basis of what the reason for refusal on Section 106 public open space is in the committee report, plus a highway reason based upon Wendy's concerns around the highways access into the site. Councillor Hart has therefore seconded that, and unless Alan disagrees, we can take a vote on that.
Yes, so Councillor Hobin's proposed that. If Councillor Hartness is seconding it, then that's what's before the chair.
Okay, so just to clarify, Councillor Hobin has proposed a motion, Councillor Hartness has seconded it. All in favour? Six, yeah. The application is rejected. Does anybody want to take a comfort break, or do you want to take a 5-minute comfort break? Okay, thank you. Are we all present and correct? Couple. Okay, we'll re-adjourn. So next is item 8.
Thank you, Chair. This is one or two items that effectively relate to the same or different parts of the same development site. For the members that were on committee back in November 2022, you'll recall the application that we had at the time, which is a hybrid application for the Northern Routes development, which comprised a variety of different elements, including visitor centre, education facilities, events, building, outdoor growing areas and replacement sports facilities. The first of these applications relates to part of that scheme, and it's actually a revision to the arrangements for that. So in effect, the principle of this type of development, so the visitor centre, events building, forestry depot, etc., was approved under that original scheme. In that sense, the principle of the development has already previously been determined by committee. When the applicant carried out initial assessments of the site, particularly a couple of issues. One was the relation to the trees on the site, but also perhaps more significantly, coal mining legacy features on the site. There were potential difficulties with the scheme that originally was put forward. So this scheme in effect is for the same types of development, but with slightly different locations of the buildings and different designs of those buildings. And now I'm having the same trouble Abby had. Sorry. Right. Okay. Right. So this is the obviously the site boundary and the aerial view of the site. The site area, the particular area, is effectively in just to the right. Oops. Right. Sorry, just to the right of the centre of the view. So you see a kind of wooded area in that part of the site, which then leads on to the grassed playing fields immediately to the east of that, or to the kind of bottom right-hand corner of the site. This is the detailed site layout. So there are a number of elements to this, and we'll just show you some further details as we go along. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, that kind of bent, if you like, structure there is the main visitor centre proposal. So that's on the edge of the area, it's on the edge of the wooded area, and looks out onto an area of open space, which will form again part of the proposals for the wider Northern Routes development. In the kind of just to the right of the centre is the events building, which is located more within the centre of the wooded area on the site, and just to the kind of top right of that is the forestry depot. So as I say, all these three elements were originally included on the original scheme, but have been recited and redesigned part of this application. So these are just images of the site. We've basically taken some initial works have taken place on the site. So these are just showing the original area. As you can see, it's quite a wooded area, bottom left-hand corner. This is where the visitor centre is, and it's on the edge of the more pasture-based area. The top left shows the access to the site, which obviously will be upgraded to provide additional facilities and some parking areas alongside that. So this is the visitor centre building. As I say, this is on the edge of the wooded area, so will be set against the wooded backdrop of the site. The glazed areas, which would overlook the open space element of the site, and it's been designed in a way that minimises its visual appearance on the site, and it's in the bulk of the building. As I say, if you can obviously think of that in the backdrop of the trees that are on there. It provides a variety of learning and other facilities, including a cafe, which amongst other things, it's intended to sell produce from growing areas on the site. As we lead on to the second of the two applications on this site that comes forward. Officers consider the design is acceptable. It's been slightly recited primarily, as I said earlier, for issues to do with the coal mining legacy, so it now completely avoids any potential for that as further investigations of the ground are carried out. This is the events building, and again it's got a kind of unique appearance, but again it's located, as you can see from the left hand image, within a largely wooded area, so it's very much a vertical setting in which it's located, so you know the appearance, the views you will get of it won't be as prominent as you can see in those particular views of the building. The forestry depot serves a variety of purposes, so there are offices in there, there's training facilities in there, and obviously serves for the forestry service as well, the park service as well on the site, has its separate service yard that deals with that. Again, it's obviously located at the entrance to the site, so there's vehicular access is deemed acceptable to get into the building. But as I say, again, this is a variation on the original scheme, which involved two buildings on the site. So these have now been combined into a part two-storey structure. In terms of other elements of this, at the Kings Road, Honeywell Lane junction, there already is an existing, as members probably know, a parking area. It's fairly informal at the moment. It's proposed to upgrade that area, and as part of that there will be alterations to the end of Honeywell Lane, and particularly in the junction of a row of terrace properties that are in that location. A scheme has been put forward, as you can see on there, for how that will work. As Wendy pointed out, obviously due to some absence, we've not really gone through that in detail, apart from there are some tweaks that would be required to that. So you'll notice in the recommendation that we're not approving that layout, but we are recommending that the scheme is worked on a little bit further in order to deal with a couple of issues on there in terms of that layout. And this is just an indicative image to obviously give you an impression of the visitor centre, hopefully once completed. So as I say, in principle, the three parts of the development have previously been approved on the site. In terms of the design and layout of the site, in terms of the impact on the local environment, particularly the trees, so some trees will be removed, but there is a landscaping scheme as part of that. There's a scheme for replacement biodiversity on the site that would meet the 10% gain. Those matters will all be dealt with within the conditions of the application. So therefore it's recommended for approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. Graham, if we could just go back to the image of the site layout. Just want to check something more than anything. So I might be moving on to the next proposal, so do tell me if I'm wrong. The football pitches aren't being touched as part of this development, are they?
No, this isn't part of this development. When we get onto the next application,
Right.
it is an issue. But this is more within the wooded area.
I'll hold off until the next one then.
Councillor Cosgrove?
It's just a query, because you had a car park up earlier on. Well, is that the car park they actually use for the football pitches? That's currently used for the football pitches?
Sorry. Yeah, the car park, well, it's used for a variety of purposes. It probably is used for football pitches, but obviously people in general park on there. They're going walking along that area as well. So it's just it's an open access car park, but that will be extended and obviously more formalised as part of this proposal.
What's the increased number of spaces that will be available?
I don't have that information readily to hand.
The reason I've got a concern, if you've got football matches going on then pitch, and you also want people to visit the visitor centre, will there be capacity to accommodate both?
Well, there are additional. You probably get this because on the left-hand side, so that's the car park area, that's where we're dealing with. If you look on the right-hand side, so as you're heading down the little access track down to the visitor centre, you'll probably be able to make out in the kind of browny colour. Those are parking spaces that are provided on there. Peter's giving me, there we go. I got there in the end. So along there, so there are additional parking spaces that obviously don't exist at the moment.
Can I ask an additional question then? Because currently that road, or there's a kind of road there that's actually blocked off for vehicle access. Do we perceive to be any issues if that road then becomes open for vehicle access? Does that make sense? The one from the car park, oh no, I'm thinking of another one higher up, aren't I? I'm thinking of another one higher up, it's fine.
The improvements to that, so the main access to this will be the track that comes down towards King's Road. I'm sorry.
Would you like to withdraw your question? Thank you. Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, obviously, in the Highways Office said that there needs to be requires implementation of a proposed access and parking arrangements. And then you mentioned about some further work needs on the highways implementation, and it'd be part of a condition. I couldn't find which condition that might be, but if you could just clarify just that situation, because I know obviously you've made there's been some concerns over parking as well, but if you could just clarify that, that'd be very helpful.
If you would, Wendy, please.
So when the original application was received, I had concerns. I can't really click on anything. The car park at the bottom at King's Road, if you look there, that is vastly improved. The whole access arrangement now is vastly improved from what it is. And that was originally a condition placed on the original application. The applicants worked up basically the condition now. And the only information, because again, I have been off for a few weeks, we just didn't resolve. One of the residents did have a concern about the right turn out of the little road in front of the terraced houses. So there is an improvement that's to be done there, and that is included in one of the conditions. And I'll just say, hopefully to try and put the residents' minds at rest in the terraced housing, by closing off the road in front of the terraced houses, I've tried to make sure that any traffic using the wider site doesn't nip down there. Firstly, annoying the residents because it's quite narrow and it's usually parked up, but also that would introduce a highway safety issue if they try and turn out of the second access onto King's Road. So we're funneling them all to an improved access near the car park.
It's councillors. It's condition 17, councillor.
Councillor Quigg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on when you say formalise the parking, will that include any sort of timing restrictions, any delays, any costs or anything like that?
I think that might be a question you can put to the applicant if the applicant speaks. As far as I'm aware, no, there are no proposals to introduce.
There's nothing about EV charging points going in, because that's a bit of a thing that seems to be occurring all over the place at the minute.
Yeah.
And we lose parking spaces as a result.
Again, I'm sure the applicant will be able to clarify.
Councillor Cosgrove.
It's a question for Wendy. Have we got disabled bays near the actual buildings?
The answer to that definitely is yes.
How many?
This is the advantage of not having we mentioned it. And
yeah, looking at the plan, it looks like five is the darker ones, yeah.
Yeah,
and there's also disabled bays in the other car park as well. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis. Sorry about that. I think if we could bring Richard Purser to speak on behalf of the applicant. Thank you. Just take your time, and when you're ready, you're ready.
Well, no worries. I won't go to speak for very long anyway, but I think actually Graham's probably covered over most of the points in terms of what the ambitions of the application is. And as he set out, it's to do with, now that the contract's begun into the detailed design stage, looking at some of the site constraints in more detail, there has to be some revisions made, and he's set them out to you. The scheme will still deliver exactly the same principles and the objectives of the Northern Routes development and its ambition for the wider expanded urban farm and the eco park there. And this will enable it now to move forward into the next stage. We have been working through the contractor Wilmot Dixon and the council, Northern Routes, with discharging some of the conditions already to the existing permission, and that's what some of the points that Wendy was alluding to in the highways, which are still just having some nips and tucks to do onto that access. But again, it'll either be dealt with through the condition on this application now rather than the one we've submitted in for discharge. But other than that, I think probably might be more helpful if you have any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Does anybody have any questions? We'll go first with Councillor Quigg.
You've obviously heard the questions I reiterated just a few moments ago, so if you could answer them.
Sorry, if you could just repeat them, because there was a few questions going back and forth.
So obviously the first question was regarding when they say formalise the parking, is there going to be restrictions on times, is there going to be charging, anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no restrictions on time.
Okay. And obviously EV charging points?
There are charging points. I think it's 4, I think, potentially shown on the plan, but without bringing it up. But that's in the main car park that's into there, which is a requirement within the original application as well.
Councillor Charters. You're quick off the mark again, Councillor Quigg. Any further questions? No, thank you for your time, Richard. Is there any debate to be had? Any? Or shall we?
Happy to formally move the recommendations.
I'll second it.
I think Councillor. Well, you seconded it. Right, so we've got Councillor Charters moving to approve, Councillor Davies to second the approval. All in favour? Oh, unanimous. That's the first consensus of the evening. Thank you. Item number 9, which is a related matter, I believe. Would you like to talk us through it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is the same site, part of the same development, but it's being dealt with in a slightly different way in terms of this is a reserved matters application in connection with one of the elements of that scheme, which is the growing area, and this is the area which is on part of the playing fields of the site. And it's just located, as I say, to this kind of southeast of the site we've just been looking at. So it's like in the centre, just to the bottom there, it's that area of the site, the more bright green part of it. And obviously you can see an image of what that looks like at the present time. So this is the proposal. So it's a reserved matters application effectively in relation to the layout of the site, the design of it, the landscaping and so forth of the site. Predominantly, it's an open area with various different growing hub sections within there, and then a number of smallish buildings which are associated with it, storage barn, etc. within there, covered area for the site and so on. So these will provide various facilities and associated with that area. They're fairly small scale, and in the context of the overall site will have limited visual or any other impact on the area. As I say, it's part of the original application, so there are a lot of other conditions that are attached to the original outline. They're being dealt with through separate process on this particular site. But the scheme itself, as I say, is effectively going to be an open area. It's just dealing with the details of that and those structures, and they've been looked at and are considered to be acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Charters.
Graham, as I alluded to before, I had a bit of a question on the current football pitches there. Is there going to be any loss of use of the marked out pitches that are currently on the site?
Yes, and this is where it ties in with the original outline approval. So there are proposals for replacement facility to be provided. There is a condition on that outline approval that requires, before this development takes place, the details of how that will be provided to be final. So they have to be agreed at that point. You'll notice that there's reference to Sport England on there, and Sport England originally objected to that. That obviously committee considered that and granted permission. As part of a process at that time, it was referred to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State determined not to call the application in, notwithstanding Sport England's objection. There's a couple of issues that they've raised this time, but as you'll see in the report, they've been dealt with, and one of those is to do with that alternative, precisely the question that you've just asked. So that's a matter that is being dealt with under the outline application, but quite clearly the sport facility, the playing field on this part of the site, will have to be relocated as part of that scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Graham. Any Councillor Cosgrove?
Just to follow up on that, do we have a location of where the replacement pitch will be?
There. So up at the top, obviously, of the aerial image, so it's the area further up to the north, to the east of the site. So on the right-hand side of the site, you see some kind of yellowy green areas. Oops, forget about the technology. Hang on, here we go. Here we go. Up in these areas of the site. Whoops. I'm all nerves. There you go.
Just a query on that, because isn't there an existing pitch already there that is used by junior teams?
Those areas are in very poor state of repair. I don't think they're formally used at the present time, and part of the scheme is to actually bring those up to an acceptable standard. I think they're uneven and gradually overgrown in places at the moment. So again, this scheme will set out how that will be laid out, what the the surfacing and so forth of that.
We've got Councillor Quigg. And then
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Graham, what's the council's playing pitch strategy? Because last time I checked, it was out of date, and Sport England have been asking for a while to get that up to date. So where is that?
The new playing pitch strategy is being prepared at the moment. So.
But that's been a long time overdue, and I'm not being funny, but we're losing pitches and then saying we might gain some pitches further on, but it would be helpful to have a overall view of that, really.
So just can I come back on that? We have to be clear on 2 points here. First of all, the reprovision of the playing pitch is not relevant to this reserve matters application. It's already been worked out through the outline permission that's been granted. So it's not a reason for us to consider in terms of determining this application. Secondly, the condition on that outline permission makes it clear that the reprovision of a playing pitch has to be addressed. So that has already been covered. It is satisfactory. The committee approved it previously in terms of that outline permission, and the Secretary of State declined to call it in. So we're okay on playing pitches.
I've got 3 more, and then I think we'll bring the applicant in. Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Graham, you mentioned about the pitches where they were going to be placed, and looking at that, it looks as if there's quite a number of trees there, which I presume would then be a loss of a number of trees. Was that factored in the other bit as part of the tree planting schemes and that sort of thing, or does that need to be a further consideration?
Again, as I've just said, playing pitch provision is not relevant to this particular application because the reserve matters is purely on the growing hubs and the layout of that.
Councillor?
Thank you for that. The pitch that you're replacing, you talked about taking it to the smaller pitch where the junior pitch is. Is the pitch not bigger adult-sized playing pitch? And you're going to say no, you can't ask that question.
So the playing pitch is not part of this application. So this is the
So he's not going to tell
matters
me.
purely for the growing hub.
Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Charters?
I really hope that this one does count as being relevant.
Just please.
In the report, it mentions that Sport England wanted a ball strike risk assessment. I have just noticed that at the the right-hand side of the picture is, I believe, is Glodick Cricket Club. So I was just wondering if there's been any ball strike assessment from the cricket club side. I know there has been from the council report from the current pitches side, but obviously cricket balls can go through glass quite easily. I've hit a fair few cars in my time playing junior cricket, so just want to make sure we've done that assessment.
Apart from you bragging about how far you can hit, it's a
He was
cricket
actually
ball.
playing on the street at the time.
No, I don't think it has, and it wasn't an issue that was raised. I think the separation distance between the site and the fact that, again, there's a bank of trees between them, which is exactly the same issue to the playing fields that are on the left-hand side. So again, there's a separation of over 20 metres, and that's obviously a football pitch with a bank of trees in between, and there will actually be a boundary fence around the growing hub as well, so it's not deemed to be a particular issue on this particular development.
You could always offer to knock a few if you... We'll just have to find a suitable bowler. Okay, I think we'll bring on the applicant, Ian Ford. No problem. When you're ready.
Thank you very much. And just to clear up, I'm representing the applicant. My name's Ian Ford. I'm the planning agent for this application. As has already been mentioned, this application relates specifically to the phase of the wider overall Northern Route site that was approved at this planning committee in 2022 as part of the hybrid application. Therefore, as has already been picked up, the Reserve Matters application simply adds further detail onto the growing hub areas in terms of layout, appearance, landscaping, etc. This phase looks to provide a market garden, including a barn, polytunnels, a small hub building, and a variety of external growing areas. And this is something that Northern Roots has been promoting on site for some time, but at a smaller scale. And this permanent setup will help encourage more of the local schools and communities to get involved. Not only will this urban farm bring members of the community together, but it will allow it will allow for its own community to be created with a shared interest and sense of purpose focused on community growing, enabling people to create new social networks, reducing social isolation and encouraging greater social cohesion. And it was some of these great benefits that allowed this application to be approved in hybrid form. I will pick up and clarify on Sport England again, if that's okay, because it was mentioned about whether the marked out pitches would be built on or impacted. It's actually not the marked out pitches that will be built on, which I'm just going to point, which are these areas. The playing fields in question, not playing pitches, will be replaced with market gardens, allotments, etc. It's important to note that these fields, these playing fields, have not been formally used in over 5 years, and the MPPF clearly states that other recreational uses, that includes allotments via its definition, are permitted on these existing playing fields. Further allotments and market gardens will also be developed on existing playing fields, but 2 new playing pitches, as has already been mentioned, will be provided close by to balance out this loss. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Councillor Hartness?
Just get assurances that you'll be doing tree planting in accordance with any trees that are lost. You'll make sure that you'll be planting new trees.
The proposed landscaping in the application will be accorded to.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Well, I think you've been let off lightly there, Ian. Thanks for your time. Do we want to have any debate on this matter?
Can we move it for recommendation?
Yes, okay. Council moving there for recommendation. Do I have a... You'll have a seconder. All in favour? Abstains? Against? Okay, thank you. We now move on to item 10.
Thank you, Chair. So the last two planning applications on the agenda tonight are items 10 and 11, and they're both on the same street, which is purely coincidence. They're not in any way related to each other. So we'll just start with item 10, which is number 42 Parkfield in Chadderton. This is a householder planning application, which, as you know, aren't normally brought to committee unless there's a specific reason. So in this case, the owner, not the applicant, but the owner of this property is understood to be related to Councillor Jabbar. So it's simply for transparency reasons in accordance with our constitution and scheme of delegation that a committee decision is needed. As you can see, it is an application for a single-storey rear extension. Just in terms of explaining the nature of that, there's a photograph here just for a bit of context of the rear of the property, but more importantly perhaps the plans here. So it's a full width extension to the rear of the property, so that width being 5.8 metres, and the projection, the rearward projection, is 6 metres. Originally, when the application was received, that projection was 10 metres, so amended plans have been received during the consideration of the application because as officers we weren't happy to support a 10-metre scheme, but given the reduction in it and having obviously assessing it against the relevant policies which are referred to in the report in terms of impacts on amenity and design, it's felt on balance that it is acceptable, and you'll see that it's recommended for approval. Just as a bit of a housekeeping matter, there is an update on the late list because we've had some additional representations received raising objections to the scheme since the publication of the original report. So that's the first item, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Okay, thank you. I'd like to call forward Lorraine Boniface. Hiya. Listen, I can only apologise for your wait. Okay.
I'm a bit of a novice to this, so I'm not sure what I'm
So am I. Okay, just when you're ready, just press the button there, and in your own time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. My name is Lorraine Boniface, and I'm here to represent my mum, Joan Bucock. She's 76 years old and the sole resident of 44 Parkfield, the adjoining property. Even though the plant has been altered to nearly 6 metres, the reasons that my mum and her family still oppose the said application are as follows. There is a loss of light in the downstairs accommodation and half of the garden, including a patio area. This will lead to increased electricity bills to heat and provide light in 44 Parkfield for an old age pensioner who lives on her own all year round, including the summer months. My mum has already got a double-storey extension on the other side, number 46 Parkfield, which causes lack of natural light in the kitchen and a view of brick walls. Drainage issues are already apparent on the street due to excessive overbuilding of extensions with the implementation of pumps. My mum feels that she's worried about future applications for bedroom accommodation and added parking issues if this is approved. There is also a mature tree close to the 6 metre boundary, and this needs to be checked. She feels that her privacy is overlooked and security. As a family and representing my mum, we feel that this is morally wrong. It is a respect issue. Joan Bucock has lived in this house for 55 years, and it is a safe place at 76 years of age. She should be able to enjoy her garden with natural sunlight and be able to live in her home with natural light. This will obviously have an impact on her mental health as she feels very intimidated by the planning application. I would also like to add a planning application has already been submitted on 38 Parkfield and accepted for a 6 metre extension, so the lady living at number 40 will have building work on both sides of her house at the same time. That's it.
Thanks, Elaine. Just on a personal level, how is your mum?
She feels very intimidated by all this, and you can understand she's not on the internet. She doesn't understand. She wouldn't be able to come here today, so that's why I'm representing her. And I've got my son there as well, her grandson, because at the end of the day, she's 76 and she doesn't understand all this. All she knows is that she's lived there 50 odd years of her life and she's going to be plummeted into darkness. That's how she feels at the moment.
I'd just like to say that she's lucky to have you as a daughter.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the objector? Councillor Charters?
Yeah, it's just a very quick one. It's just obviously saying about your mum feeling that it should be plunged into darkness. This might just be how I'm not being able to visualise it. How would a single-storey extension affect light coming in?
Because if you look at the back, if you look at the plans, it's 3.7 metres. It's 2.3 metres immediately, and then it goes into 3.7 metres height. I've checked in a garden with the tape measure at the weekend, and the length of it does extend it extends half of a garden. So you can imagine the actual extension will take all her sunlight off that side.
Anybody else would like to? No? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers. Could you just press the...
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm mindful of... Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chair. As the lady said there, it wasn't really point. There wasn't any point asking her the question, but she said it's more for the planning department to address. I mean, you've approved it, but are they valid? Is it valid that what the lady said about loss of light and all that stuff? Is that is that going to make that much difference to this lady?
Okay, so just answering a general point, really. I mean, all residential extensions have a degree of impact, and there are certain things, especially on the rear properties, that can be achieved without even requiring planning permission under permitted development rights. So, for example, a 3-metre projection on the rear of this property wouldn't even need approval from the local authority. Obviously, this came in as a 10-metre extension where we felt that it would be out of keeping, out of character, and basically too much for that site. And that's led to some discussions about reducing it, to reduce the impact. In terms of the things that have been raised, things like loss of light and loss of privacy and drainage issues, they're all obviously referenced in the report, but we're looking at the orientation of the properties, obviously the eaves height, and the design shape of the roof. It's got a hipped roof, and it's of course there'll be some degree of impact, but not to any extent that would justify refusal of planning permission. I hope that covers it.
Councillor?
Thank you. She's gone now, but she brought up issue with the tree. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, has this been looked into? How close is it to the house?
I'll be completely honest, I'm not aware of the tree in question. That's the rear view of the property in question here. There are no, to my knowledge, there's no trees with any tree preservation orders on, for example, so the loss of a tree would simply be a civil matter as it would without any application being made.
Oh, sorry, we're just looking at Google Maps and it's showing it on there. And it's quite...
We're not disputing the tree exists, are we? We're disputing. Well, we're clarifying whether it's relevant, and are you intimating it isn't?
Yeah. So there's no. The loss of that tree wouldn't need any permission from us. It's not got a tree preservation order on it, so the relevance of it to the proposed extension is quite limited, really. It would remain a civil matter if that tree comes out and there's disagreement between the neighbours about it.
Okay, Councillor Quigg, and then...
I think I've raised this before at the last planning meeting, but when we take these photographs, we could do with a little bit more context, because I'm just looking on my phone now, and how you missed a tree that size, I'm flabbergasted, because it's huge. So that would have been helpful in terms of context and a few other photographs as well, just to give us a more broader impact. And knowing this area quite well, the gardens at this particular juncture actually start to narrow at the front, and then again at the back it's quite deceptive. That does look quite long, but in reality they're not, in terms of the properties at the rear and the side. So, you know, it is going to become quite evasive, as you can see the other extensions as well, and the back of them as well.
Thank you, Councillor Quigg. Councillor Cosgrove?
It was just a question. Was a tree not mentioned at all in any of the application? I'm just, because looking at this, I think it'd have to be removed for the actual extension. So I'm just wondering if it was involved at any point. No?
Not to my knowledge. The tree's never been factored in, but if the tree needs to be removed to accommodate the extension, then it needs to be removed. It would be a civil matter if there was disagreement between the neighbours regarding it, in the same way that would be without this application before us.
Okay. Last one, Councillor Hartness.
So when we usually on applications, it might be generally because we deal with bigger ones, but when we lose trees, we have to replace them at a ratio of 1 to 3. Would this be the same situation in this case? Would they have to sort of go and plant 3 trees somewhere?
We obviously have that policy in place, but we've got to be mindful of the fact that what could be achieved without permission here. So we do have a tree replacement policy, the 2 for 1. Whether it's not usually applied in the context of a house or a domestic extension where there's a fallback position that an extension could be carried out without planning permission, which I think has a significant fallback position for the assessment of this application.
Is that a stipulation we could add if we passed this application?
My opinion would be it would be unreasonable to impose that for the reasons I've said about the fallback position in terms of what could be achieved without planning permission here.
Thank you. Councillor Charters?
Might be easier to just ascertain which side of the boundary line the tree lives on. Because if it's on the applicant's side, then surely the applicant has a legal right to do something with the tree in their house if it doesn't have a TPO. And if it's on the neighbour's side, then yeah, there would need to be a discussion.
It's on the... Okay. Do we need to have some sort of tree report on this matter?
So, first of all, to answer that question, no. I think, as has just been clarified, the tree is on the neighbour's side. So, therefore, the construction of the extension would not actually be affecting the trunk of the tree if that's on the neighbour's side. Therefore, what Martin's referring to is if it ultimately then has an impact on that tree, in terms of the branches or in terms of how that tree can thrive, that becomes a civil matter between the 2 neighbours, unfortunately. So I think, as you say, if it had been on the applicant's side, it would have been picked up as saying, well, actually, can that tree still exist with the extension? And if not, we may have sought a replacement if possible. But the bottom line, in a domestic setting like this, when it's not TPO'd, someone can remove a tree on their own garden without any permission whatsoever. But as I say, in this case, it's been clarified, it's in the neighbour's land, so the actual construction of the extension would not affect the trunk.
So the tree is saved?
So the tree is there, and it wouldn't be directly affected immediately, but obviously it may harm it down the line in terms of affecting how it can grow and thrive. But that becomes then a civil matter.
Thank you. Any further? You propose to move. Do I get a second? Okay, all in favour? Against? Abstentions? The application is passed. We move on to item 11.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is an application at not too far away at 54 Parkfield in Chadderton. Again, it's a householder application. So the reason this application has been brought to committee is triggered by the applicant being related to a member of staff within the planning service. So again, for transparency reasons, it requires your decision as planning committee. So it is another single-storey rear extension. So it's as you can see, it's close to the site we've just looked at. This is a rear view of the property, providing a bit of context. It is in the top left of that floor plan. You can see the slightly different shaded area there. That's the footprint of the proposed extension. And it's 2 metres deep, 3.4 metres wide, and simply squares off the rear of the property by joining an existing rearward projection. It's recommended for approval, considered to be acceptable against our adopted policies. Thank you.
Are we happy just to move and... So I'll get a move. It can be. What about car parking spaces, Councillor Davies? Enthusiastically. Okay, we've got a proposal, did we say, and a second. All in favour? Thank you. Thanks to Peter and his team, and thanks to everyone who's I do this often, don't I? There's one more item. What item would that be, Peter?
It's the appeal. So as normal, it's just a case of noting the report, the content of the report. It doesn't require a decision, but obviously if there's any questions on any of them, happy to take those away.
Councillor Charters?
It's just about the appeal on Bessom Hill End Farm. I've noticed more, I can't remember the word, as vehicles being added to this area and demolition equipment since the appeal has been dismissed. And I was just wondering if we've got any word on enforcement and what's being done there, because it's been raised with me by my residents in St James. And I imagine Councillor Hints has been raised with you as well.
It has.
Okay, we'll have to take that away, and we can come back to you separately on that. Just provide a bit of an update, so we'll need a bit more.
Could you include me in your response on to that? Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. See you next month. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.